Amina woke before dawn, as she always did, when the world was still quiet and the air carried a soft chill. For a few seconds, she lay still, staring at the ceiling, letting herself exist in that small space between sleep and reality. In that space, everything was normal again. Haris was beside her, turning in his sleep, maybe mumbling something silly like he used to. But then the silence stretched too long, too heavy, and she blinked. Pulling herself back to the truth, she turned her head. Haris lay on the bed near the window, exactly as he had been for nearly 2 years. Still, silent, unmoving. Amina pushed herself up quickly, as if moving faster would stop the familiar ache from settling into her chest. She tied her hair back, wrapped her shawl around her shoulders, and went straight to the window. She opened it just enough to let the pale morning light slip inside. It touched the room gently, brushing against the walls, the furniture, and finally his face. "Good morning," she said softly, like she did every day. There was no reply, but she smiled anyway. She moved around the room with quiet purpose. She adjusted the curtains, folded the blanket at the foot of the bed, and checked the small table beside him where medicines were neatly arranged. Her hands moved with care, but her eyes kept drifting back to his face, searching for something, anything that might be different today. There never was. Still, she didn't stop looking after preparing everything. She sat beside him and reached for his hand. It felt warm, just like always. That warmth was the only thing that kept her grounded. It told her he was still here, still fighting somewhere deep inside. "You always hated mornings," she said lightly, her thumb brushing over his fingers. "Remember how I had to drag you out of bed? You'd complain like a child." Her lips curved into a small smile, but her eyes stayed heavy. She paused, waiting, as if expecting him to laugh or argue like he used to. But the silence remained. Amina inhaled slowly and continued, refusing to let the quiet win. "I made tea," she added, even though he couldn't drink it. "The strong one you like." She talked like this every day, about small things, about memories, about moments that only the two of them shared. She filled the room with words so it wouldn't feel so empty. After a while, she stood up and began her routine. She carefully helped him sit up slightly, supporting his back with practiced ease. She fed him slowly, making sure every movement was gentle. She wiped his face, adjusted his clothes, and made sure he was comfortable. It wasn't easy work. It required patience, strength, and endless care. But Amina never rushed. She treated every action like it mattered because to her it did. Hours passed quietly. The sun rose higher, filling the room with warmth. Outside, life moved on. People walked by, cars passed, children laughed on their way to school. Everything continued as if nothing had changed. But inside that room, time felt different. Later in the morning, there was a knock at the door. Amina hesitated for a moment before opening it. It was her neighbor Samina holding a small bowl of food. "I made extra," Samina said, offering it with a gentle smile. "Thought you might not have had time to cook." Amina accepted it politely. "Thank you." Samina's eyes shifted toward the room behind her, where Haris lay. Her expression softened. But there was something else there too, something like pity. "You should rest sometimes," Samina said carefully. "You can't keep doing this alone forever." Amina nodded, though she didn't respond. "And have you thought about what we discussed?" Samina added, her voice lowering. "You're still young. Your whole life is ahead of you." Amina's grip on the bowl tightened slightly. "I'm fine," she said quietly. Samina sighed but didn't push further. She had said these things many times before. Everyone had. After she left, Amina closed the door and leaned against it for a second. Her eyes closed, and for a brief moment, the weight of everything pressed down on her. But she didn't let it stay. She walked back into the room, back to him, and sat down again like nothing had happened. "They worry too much," she said softly, glancing at Haris. "You know how people are." She smiled faintly, as if sharing a private joke. The day moved forward. In the afternoon, Amina picked up a book from the shelf. It was one of Harris's favorites. She had read it so many times she almost knew it by heart. But she still opened it and began reading aloud. Her voice was calm and steady, filling the room with life. She paused at certain lines, just like he used to when he read it to her, adding small expressions, as if he might still be listening sometimes. While reading, she imagined his eyes following the words, his mind reacting, his heart understanding. She held on to that thought tightly as the evening approached. The light in the room softened. Shadows stretched across the walls, and the quiet deepened again. Amina finished her tasks for the day and sat beside him once more. She looked tired now, not just physically, but deeply in a way that couldn't be fixed with rest. Still, her hand reached for his without hesitation. "I was thinking today," she began slowly, her voice softer than usual, "about that trip we never took." Her eyes lowered. "You promised we'd go to the mountains," she continued. "You said we'd watch the sunrise together. Just like this." She glanced toward the window where the last light of the day was fading. "I used to be so excited," she admitted. "I even packed a bag once, just in case you surprised me." A small laugh escaped her, but it quickly faded. "Guess I was foolish." The room fell silent again. Amina sat there, holding his hand, her thoughts drifting between past and present. There were moments when doubt tried to creep in, moments when the voices of others echoed in her mind, asking the same question over and over. "Why are you still here?" But every time, she pushed it away because leaving had never been an option, not for her, not for the promises they had made. Night came slowly. Amina dimmed the lights and adjusted his blanket, making sure he was comfortable. She moved with the same care, the same attention to detail, as if every small act mattered just as much as the bigger ones. When everything was done, she didn't leave the room. She never did. Instead, she pulled a chair closer to his bed and sat down. The world outside grew quiet. The noise faded, and all that remained was the soft sound of breathing. Amina leaned forward slightly and held his hand again, her fingers wrapping around his. "I'm still here," she whispered. Her voice carried a quiet strength. "Even through the exhaustion, I promised I wouldn't leave." She rested her head gently beside his hand. Closing her eyes for a moment, time passed. Minutes, maybe hours. The room stayed still, wrapped in silence. And then something shifted. Amina's eyes opened instantly. She froze. Her breath caught in her throat as she felt a faint movement. So small it could have been imagined, but she knew it wasn't. Her heart began to race. As she slowly lifted her head, her eyes locked on his hand. For a second, nothing happened. Then a slight twitch. Amina's entire body went still. She stared at his fingers, her mind struggling to catch up with what she had just seen. "Haris," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't answer." But her grip tightened, as if afraid the moment might disappear. Tears filled her eyes without warning. Hope, something she had buried deep inside to protect herself, rose suddenly, breaking through everything. She leaned closer, her heart pounding louder with each second. "Haris, can you hear me?" she asked again, barely able to speak. The room remained silent, but this time, it felt different. Amina didn't move. She didn't breathe. She just watched, waited, and held on, because for the first time in 2 years, something had changed. The days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months. Haris's recovery, slow at first, began to show signs of steadiness. His body grew stronger, and he could sit up longer without help. Yet the mind was still fragile, a maze of missing memories and half-formed recognition. Amina knew she had to walk carefully along the line between hope and heartbreak. She couldn't rush him, couldn't push him to remember what was lost. She could only guide him gently, each step building a new path forward. Amina began to change the way she spoke to him. She stopped asking if he remembered their past directly. Instead, she became a storyteller, a companion, someone who could fill the room with life without demanding acknowledgement. "You've always had a soft spot for the flowers by the window," she said one morning, adjusting the sunlit curtains. I tried planting some new ones. You might like them." Haris looked at the small blooms she had arranged, his eyes lingering on them longer than before. He didn't say anything, but a small smile tugged at the corner of his lips, almost involuntarily. That smile was a crack in the wall, and Amina clung to it like a lifeline. She spent more time reading to him, sometimes for hours, choosing books and stories she knew he loved. She read with inflection, with laughter and pauses, hoping that the emotions would reach him even if the words did not. And sometimes she caught him humming softly, a tune he had loved, or tapping his fingers lightly along the edge of the blanket. Those tiny movements lit fire in her chest, reminding her that he was coming back to life, even if only in pieces. One evening, the rain fell softly against the windows, the rhythm almost hypnotic. Amina had been reading a story about a couple separated by war and reunited against all odds. She paused and looked at Haris. His eyes were wide, focused on her face in a way they hadn't been before. She felt her heart tighten. "Do you like it?" she asked softly. He blinked, then nodded, his lips parting slowly. "I do," he said. His voice was fragile, uncertain, but it was his own. Amina's hands shook slightly as she reached for his. She held it firmly, letting him feel the warmth and strength behind her touch. He looked down at their joined hands, his brow furrowed in thought, as if trying to place her, trying to understand why she was there, why she had never left. From that day, Haris began to ask more questions. Small ones at first, about the house, the routine, the garden, and the flowers she had planted. Each question was an opportunity for Amina to tell stories, to weave fragments of their past into the present without overwhelming him. She learned to balance truth with patience, memory with gentleness. Sometimes he would ask about events she hadn't mentioned before, events that belonged to their shared life. She would smile and answer honestly, but softly, never forcing him to recall, only allowing him to feel the comfort of her presence. It was not easy. Some days he would grow frustrated, confused, or even angry at himself for not knowing. Those were the hardest days for Amina. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the struggle between memory and reality, and she had to hold back her own tears, her own pain. She had to remain the anchor, calm and patient, steady, even when her heart screamed at her to cry or to beg him to remember. And she did. She remained. One afternoon, after weeks of careful observation and gentle encouragement, Haris made a small, unexpected gesture. He reached out for her hand without thinking, without hesitation. It was deliberate, intentional, not a reflex. Amina froze, her heart hammering in her chest. He looked at her, eyes wide and searching. "Amina," he said softly, testing the sound of her name, tasting it as if it were new. I feel something." Tears welled in her eyes, and she squeezed his hand gently. "I'm here," she whispered. "I've always been here." Haris's brow furrowed as he tried to process the sensation, the emotions he didn't fully understand. "I don't remember," he admitted, voice hesitant, "but I feel it. Something about you. It feels familiar." It was not the full recognition she had longed for, but it was enough. Enough to know that the bond they shared had not been completely lost, that the love that had never wavered was still alive. Still possible. From that day, a slow transformation began. Haris started to seek her presence more often. He asked for her advice, her opinions, her stories. He found comfort in her voice, her calm, and her warmth. He would sit quietly beside her in the evenings, sometimes just holding her hand, listening to the soft sounds of the room. And each time he did, Amina felt the weight of all the years lift slightly, replaced by the delicate, fragile hope that they could find each other again. Their interactions grew more natural, more intimate in subtle ways. Haris would smile at her jokes, laugh quietly at her stories, sometimes even share a thought of his own. Amina encouraged him gently, never forcing him to speak or remember more than he could. She had learned the delicate art of patience, of love that waits, that nurtures, that heals slowly. One evening, as the sky darkened and the rain fell softly outside, Haris spoke again, more clearly than ever before. "Amina," he said, his voice steady this time. I don't remember everything, but I feel like I know you. You make me feel safe." Amina's chest tightened with a mixture of relief and heartache. He didn't remember all the love, all the years, all the sacrifices, but he felt something, a connection he could not explain. And that was enough. She leaned forward, brushing a gentle kiss across his hand. "That's all that matters," she whispered. "We can start from here." From that moment, she began to rebuild their life together, not as it had been, not as a continuation of the past, but as something new, something fragile and precious. They began to create new routines, small rituals that connected them. Morning tea at the window, reading together in the afternoons, quiet walks in the garden where he could slowly regain strength. Each moment was a building block, a thread weaving a new bond, layer by layer. Emotion by emotion. Haris's confidence grew slowly, and with it, his desire to connect. He began to anticipate her presence, to seek her out during quiet moments, to wait for her stories, her soft voice, her calm guidance. And as he did, Amina felt a love forming again, different from before. Yes, but stronger, rooted in patience, devotion, and survival. They were not reclaiming the past. They were creating a new present, one where love was not measured by memory, but by choice. One afternoon, as they sat in the garden, Haris turned to her with a seriousness she had not seen in a long time. "Amina," he said softly, "I don't remember everything we had, but I want to know you. I want to be with you, to learn about you, about us." Again, Amina felt tears rise to her eyes, but she smiled, a full, unrestrained smile. "We can," she said gently. "We will. One step at a time." The following weeks were a blend of small victories and gentle challenges. Haris regained more mobility and confidence, and his questions about their shared life became deeper, more thoughtful. He asked about their favorite places, their traditions, the little details that defined them as a couple. Amina answered honestly, never overwhelming him, letting him piece together the fragments in his own way. And slowly, very slowly, the emotional connection deepened. The warmth between them grew, not as a reflection of the past, but as a creation of the present. The moment that marked a turning point came unexpectedly. One evening, as rain drummed gently on the roof and the room was dimly lit by a single lamp, Haris reached out and held her hand firmly, looking into her eyes. "Amina," he said softly, "I don't remember our past, but I think I'm falling for you." Time seemed to stop. Amina's breath caught and tears streamed down her cheeks. But her smile was radiant, filled with all the love and relief she had kept inside for so long. She squeezed his hand, leaning closer. "I've been here all along," she whispered, "and I've never stopped loving you. We'll write our story again." From that day, everything began to change. Haris no longer approached her with caution or confusion, but with intention and care. He sought her out, waited for her presence, and cherished her attention. Their moments together became richer, more meaningful. Every touch, every word, every glance built a new connection. A love reborn from patience, devotion, and resilience. They began to dream again, not of the past, but of the future they could create together. Trips they had once planned became possibilities anew. Conversations about shared goals and hopes returned. And the quiet laughter that had been missing for so long filled the house. Amina no longer carried the weight of waiting silently. Haris was present, engaged, and slowly learning to love her again in this new life they were building. The months passed and their bond grew stronger. Haris would often look at her with wonder, sometimes catching himself mid-thought, as if realizing how deeply she had cared for him all these years. "I don't know how I got so lucky," he said one night, his voice quiet, almost vulnerable. "Even without memory, you never left me." Amina smiled, brushing her hand gently against his cheek. "Love isn't just about memory," she said softly. "It's about staying, even when everything else fades. And I chose to stay." He leaned closer, resting his forehead against hers. "Then I choose you," he whispered, again and again. It was not the love of the past, it was new, uncharted, and profound. It was love forged in patience, in sacrifice, and in the courage to rebuild from the ashes of loss.